good morning, good afternoon, good evening. No matter what time of day that you're watching us, we really appreciate you being here and joining us on this episode of the the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. Hey, I got all tongue tied there. I didn't know what show we were doing, but the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. So appreciate you being here. And today, just like every week, hey, we've got another topic for you. I sent it out to Sheryl and Brandi, and we've done a little bit of talking about this, but it actually goes along with what my point of view is. And that is one thing that's inevitable in this world is change. And if you think for a minute in your own lifetime, how things have changed, how your family life has changed, how raising children is much different, how this world changes, and it seems like change is accelerating. But what happens in life is often as individuals, as managers, we have this magic moment in life. We see a change that we need to undergo in our personal life, or perhaps it's in our professional life as a manager. But here's the problem. And I've seen this so often. People go to a conference, they go to a seminar, and they get all hyped up. They get all excited. They're going to have this new process to go through. And it's going to involve change. But the problem is people can't sustain it, such as my colleague Brandi on here, when she decided she was going to become a service type consultant. And sometimes there were tears came to her eyes. Sometimes we had conversations. She said it was harder than going through nursing training. That's hard to believe that it's harder to learn how to take care of a software program than it is how to take care of the human body when you look at that. But anyway, she got through that and she's now accomplished that. So, Cheryl, as we get going, what's your thoughts on change?
Change is inevitable. Whether you like it or not, it's going to be there. It's not that it happened, it's how you deal with it. And are you going to deal with it?
Yeah. And, another word is change is good. And when you look at this, there's been a lot of changes go on that are actually good, but they change the way and disrupt our lifestyles. That change disrupts the way we're doing business. And one of the hardest parts is, and Brandi, I'm going to ask your opinion on this, when you ask the people that work for you to change a process, to change anything, what's it like, Brandi?
Well, if I don't have their buy-in, it's very difficult. If I have their buy-in, then it's not too bad.
That's exactly right. So that's part of what goes on. Like when we do a swap meeting, part of what we're doing is we're trying to get the people in the company to buy into the needed change. We're wanting them to discuss it. And a lot of times that's what it takes. It takes communication. But what it also takes is people that have the gumption to sustain the change. So, Sheryl, you're a disc assessor. You're a person that can read personalities. You can understand where people go. And like right now, you're working with, I know one client that is trying to affect change in his speaking style and those presentation skills. So, from your aspect, how does a person sustain change?
Number one, you have to want to change. That is the beginning factor, because without the want, there'll never be the success. And the thing about it is, this gentleman that I'm working with is actually he's been remarkable just talking to him, because he is working at it. He's got a long road to hoe. He's not a natural speaker, so we're taking someone that's afraid to be in front of a crowd to a point that is moving up. But that's what he's wanting to do, and that's the same way with any change you make. You've got to have the buy-in, which is also the want to do. And we all have to make them during days. Some of them don't affect us over the long haul. The ones that I think affect people the most are the ones that are going to affect them for many years.
Got you covered. So, Brandi, from your aspect, you deal with people a lot in your work on the professional side in coaching and consulting that are actually implementing a new software program. And I think you and I both would agree that this is a painful process. This is not easy. In fact, it was really amazing. I had a conversation with a young man last Saturday at a meeting I was at, and he is a small company and he has Service Titan, but he has seemed to command this very well. And I asked him the question. In fact, I've actually sent this to service time because I think it's one of their problems. Because I asked him the question. I said, brother, as I've watched you on Facebook and I've observed your comments, you seem to have commanded Service Titan very well. Can you share why? And he said, yeah, I can tell you why. Good, tell me. He said, because I am a geek at heart. He said, I understand software, I understand computers, and it doesn't bother me to spend hours and hours digging in and how to make this program work. But Brandi, you deal with a lot of people and that don't have this geek background. And I know he's not the first person, because when I first started working with Service Titan 5 to 7 years ago, I had one client who shined in this. And I asked him, I said, hey, brother, why are you not having trouble like everybody else with? And he told me, he said, because I speak geek. Okay. I speak geek. So, Brandi, how do you keep people enthused and to sustain the challenge of implementation of a new software?
Well, I think first of all, that's why it was so hard for me, because I do not speak geek. And it's kind of funny, just talking about change. I was on a meeting right before this one with a larger group of people, and they were all millennials. And I made the comment of like, I only understood like half the words you just said. And they actually made fun of it and said, poor Brandi, she's on a call with a bunch of millennials, but it was the truth. I think with Service Titan, with the people that I coach that are implementing it, it's just reminding them that you can't screw up anything. If you screw it up, we can fix it. So don't be afraid of the system, because I think that's where a lot of the hesitation comes in, is that they're afraid of the system. And then also just reassuring them that it's going to be much better than what they had, and giving them lots and lots of reassurance and showing them how it's going to be better. I think I like it so much because the platform that we came from before Service Titan never changed. We were on it for 7 years and they never changed it. They never made any updates. Service Titan goes the opposite direction and they make updates every month. But I think that's what I like about it, because we didn't have that for so long.
Yeah. So Sheryl, from your aspect, the people you work often with are wanting to change their approach. They're wanting to change their personal way of speaking. If we look at it, instead of being a business coach, you would probably be more classified to a life coach. Would you agree with what I'm saying?
If I had to pull under a line, yes.
Right. So when we look at it, and I just did a presentation yesterday for a group that was at a conference I did at virtual, and I was explaining what they should look for in a coach. It wasn't a commercial. I told them right up front, I'm not doing this for any of you to buy my services. What I'm trying to advise you to do is, what are you looking for if you're wanting to engage a coach? And I gave them a lot of the things to look for. And that's one of them, which is we have a group here, and Brandi knows things about office and stuff and onboarding, that she's our expert in offices, softwares, those kind of things. Sheryl's our expert in more of the personal side, the personal assessment, working with people one-on-one to get their approaches down. So the buy-in, Sheryl, how do you obtain a person's buy-in? If you had a group of people working for you, what do you do to get their buy-in to the change that's needed? Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges as a manager is buy-in.
Well, since you can't push them up against the wall and hold them there anymore, you literally, the communication's the trick that you've got to do it. You've got to explain the why now. Years ago, people didn't ask you why. Now they need to know. And if you can give them enough information, then they can go with it. Now, I was one of those people. I think I told you a long time ago, when Dad was sick, I could deal with anything I knew. It was the unknown area that I couldn't deal with. And I think that's everyone. It's when you give them something and you don't explain it to them, then they're having to take it at face value. And face value does not give you buy-in anymore.
Yeah. And Brandi, somebody's dog is rammed up. I guess the Amazon man just must have pulled up. So anyway, yeah, as we talk about this buy-in thing, and that's critical. And, I just finished I did 2 SWAT meetings this week. And one of them, we were talking about lean process. We're going into waste and other things. And a young man came out in the hall and he told me, he said, Jerry, So you'll know, I worked at an ever-ready battery plant one time, and I could remember when they brought lean in and wanted us to implement lean, and everybody was against it. But as we bought in, we saw the benefit. So that's where I think as a leader, you've got to be able to speak to your people in such a way to gain their confidence in the change. I don't think they're just going to go on carte blanche. You've got to be able to present this of what is the advantage to them. It's just like in implementing software. What's the advantage to the person? What's the advantage to the worker? So, Brandi, do you agree with what I'm saying? And what will be your thoughts on that?
I do, absolutely. My first thought is on the dog barking, though. And Jerry, the reason the dog is barking, I think, is because while you were away last week, we had the dog on the show. And so I think the dog just wants to be on the show. But I think too, part of the reason sometimes why we don't get buy-in is because it's not just about showing them the benefit. It's about exploring what are their fears around it. Why are they afraid to buy in? There's usually a fear there. And so we have to explore that.
Okay. So let's go deeper. How do we find out what people's fears are? Because fears block us from moving. Like I say a lot of times in sales. In sales, many times a consumer has a perceived risk and they don't buy from you because of that perceived risk. And when I'm out at your place in a few weeks doing sales training, this is going to be one of the things that I share with your people. What are the perceived risks? So the perceived risk or lack of benefits, how do we get that across to them, Brandi?
Well, I think it's just asking them. I think it's literally, you just have to ask the question, what are the perceived risks? What are you afraid of? And let them speak those. Let them know it's a safe space, so to speak, where they can talk about it and bring up whatever fears they have.
Yeah. And that's what we do in SWAT meetings, and we properly explain that coming in. This is a day that we need to hear what you're saying about this. But Sheryl, going over to you, how do we gain the confidence? How do we gain that trust that our people will help us sustain this change?
Number one, they have to respect you. I think that's the beginning step. They have to know that you have their best interest at heart, and that you're going to walk them through the process. With the DISC assessments, you can learn their communication skills. You can communicate like they want to hear, because I know you've heard the thing, love is in the eye of the beholder. Well, conversation is in the ear of the listener, not the mouth of the speaker. So you've got to speak in, quote, their language. And if you can do that and alleviate their fears, but I mean, you need to know the what. What are their fears? They need to know why things are that, so they can deal with their fears before you can get the when of doing anything.
Yeah. And Brandi, in today's world, we're seeing a lot of blue collar companies, especially in the chimney industry, that have an increased awareness of safety, and the training of safety is coming up. And what I share a lot of times is you got to understand, when you look at it, a lot of this buy-in has been driven because of bad things have happened in the past. It's like Jim Brewer. Jim Brewer told me one time that he never imagined that somebody could fall from a ladder 8 foot and be killed. But once that reality came true, and it's kind of like liability subrogation, until people actually get sued, I don't think they think it's real. I think they think this is a fictional story we're rolling out, which it's not. So again, as we talk about this is a challenge of management. How does a manager sustain that change and not give it up?
So I was just thinking for a minute about that question. The sustaining is the hard part, right? Because we can implement it, and that's pretty easy. And typically what happens is we implement something new. Let's just say it's something we're tracking and it goes really well, and we track it for 3-4 months, and then we get busy. And so we let it fall by the wayside. And then what happens is then 4 months later, we're like, oh yeah, we need to go back to tracking that. But now your people feel defeated because you had got them bought in to this tracking. They were tracking it. And then you let it go by the wayside, and now all of a sudden you want to implement it again. And they're like, well, for how long? How long are you going to keep it around? When are you going to take it away? So I think the sustaining is honestly really the hard part. And I think it falls into making the time for it. So right now I've got a couple presentations I'm preparing for coming up, and I was looking at my calendar, and every week I say I'm going to get it done. And then every week my calendar fills up with people needing help. And so I just looked at next week and blocked off an entire afternoon so that I could work on this. If I didn't block that off, I guarantee it would fill up. So you have to make the time to sustain those changes.
Yeah. And actually it goes back to what they call the 5S of lean, because this is actually what you're going through. 5S is a good description of what's going through, because in 5S, these are the 5 steps for lean processes. Step 1 is to sort things out, And in a leadership standpoint, this means sort it out into your mind, or this means sort out the SOPs, developing an SOP priority list of what you're going to build. The next thing you do is you straighten it up. This is what you do in a warehouse, but you also have to straighten up your operations, straighten up your mind. Then you got to shine things out. You got to shine and clean everything up. Then the next thing is the standardization part. But then the 5th S comes into play, and the 5th S is where so many people fail, because the 5th S in the 5 S's of lean is sustain. And this is where I've seen so many people sustaining that change. A lot of times I'll talk to people and I'll watch them come out from an analysis of where I've done an analysis of the business, and they're all hepped up, ready to fly. And then they don't sustain that momentum. We see this after a couple months. And Brandi, you have probably seen this in people that you work with. We go through this, but we can't sustain it. And ServiceTitan, they may get part way and they kind of fall off the train. Am I seeing this right, Brandi?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I'm guilty of it myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's one thing the 3 of us do is we actually hold each other accountable to what's going on and what's happening and what needs to be done, and coming up with the processes and those kind of things. So Sheryl, what's the answer to sustaining the momentum for a person? Is there a certain dish style that does better than others as far as the sustaining segment?
A C is usually more sustainable because they're very more detail oriented. A D is they're starting projects. We start them. We're not good at finishing. An S will, or an I will never even get into the project. They're just going to talk about it. S will, they're a slower pace. They'll think about it. They'll play with it a while, and then they'll put it away. A C is who you want to push you through.
Well, what I'm thinking here is, if you've ever read the book Traction, there's 2 different personalities for leadership in a company. And very seldom do you find people that have both of those thinkings. And that is, as Mr. Wigman describes in the book Traction, and in the EOS system, you've got to have the visionary and you got to have the integrator. And when you look at it, I call them implementers. He calls them integrators, but someone has to implement it. And the problem is, if you are a visionary, visionaries, as described by Mr. Wickman in the book, have a very low level of patience. Brandi, have you ever seen people that had great ideas, but they didn't have the patience to carry them out?
Am I allowed to say I'm married to one?
Yes.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm married to one.
Yeah, you are.
And he's that I.
Yeah. Sheryl, what about you? Do you see people that are visionaries, but they can't carry it forth?
You and a lot of prospects, I do, in a lot of different ways. Myself also, Brandi, we're all guilty. We're all high Ds. Your D and your I are usually your visionaries. Your S and C's are your implementers.
Correct. And I think that's what you've got to have, because we see so many people that have the greatest ideas in the world, and then they can't carry them forth. And it's also a responsibility of the integrator of telling the visionary, hey, we're not ready to do that yet. You need to roll over and go back to sleep and kind of forget about that idea. So as we come through there, I think this is a very deep subject that everybody needs to be aware of and what's driving them. So Cheryl, someone that has a problem sustaining, what should they do to fix this? How do they fix it?
Like Brandi, a lot of times the easiest way to do is make the time to do it. Put it on your calendar. It's kind of like the New Year's resolution. The only way you're going to keep it is if you do it every day. You don't miss it. Let's face it, if it's exercising, if you miss a day, you may pick it up the next day, but you miss 2 days, it's harder to do. It's the same way with anything we start. And sustaining it is all in your mind, actually. If you can't keep your mind on it, you're not going to keep the physical going.
Okay. So, Brandi, what about you? What do you feel is a gold nugget success, way to manage the expectations and to keep the change going?
I think you said a key word there, managing the expectation. What is the expectation of when do we want this done? How do we want this done? How often do we want this done? Sheryl's C thing is spot on, because I was just thinking Wednesday in our office meeting that we have every Wednesday morning, everybody got a lot of projects this Wednesday because we're finally getting to that time where we can take on projects. And my C has been in her office ever since, just working furiously through these projects. I still have like a list of mine sitting here that I'm looking at. So I do think that personality, I think it helps to have a C on your team, I would say. But just mapping out what that looks like and putting it in writing and making sure that everybody's on the same page, that is the expectation.
Yeah. And I think it is also, can you hold yourself self-accountable? Sheryl, do you feel most people are self-accountable, or do they need someone to hold them accountable?
Very few people are self-accountable. They really are. Your C, like we were talking about, more so than anyone else. The D's, the I's definitely need someone to hold them. S, it just depends what their other three signs are. But rarely are you going to find that many people that can sustain for an extreme long amount of time without somebody having their back.
So accountability partners are a very important thing for a lot of people, okay, of pushing them forward. You agree with that?
I do. I think everybody needs one. I mean, you and I have coaches. We coach, and that's what we're there for. The guy I'm coaching, I know when we're done with our sessions that we've got set, it's not going to stick if I don't stay with it.
Yeah, and that's also one of the advantages. Like I said, when you come down into dealing with our company, a lot of times you may be talking to me, but we actually end up referring you to someone else. Could be in the company, and there's times that we refer people outside of our company because they bring the expertise to the table that particular person needs. So, Brandi, what about you? How do you feel about accountability partners, and is that something that helps to sustain?
I mean, I know it helps me. I mean, the reason I get up at 4 a.m. every day to work out is because I know that there's somebody there waiting on me that expects me to be there. And believe me, if they didn't, I wouldn't get there in the morning. So I know that it definitely helps me. I think it helps in all aspects of our life. I think you see that with people that start a diet. If they have a personal trainer, they're probably more likely to stick with it. I think it's important in business to find who that accountability partner is. So is it a spouse that you're working with? Is it a manager that you're working with? Is it an outside mentor? Is it a coach? Like Sheryl said, usually for us in our line of business, we're the ones holding the clients accountable.
Yeah. And Brandi, something that we started last year, and you were actually with me, and this was one of your ideas, and this is where working together to come up with the process. But as we do swap meetings, you came up and said, hey, we don't want to just talk about the weaknesses. We want to come up with action plans. And the action plan is what we're going to do. And after you brought that up, I use that in every meeting now. We establish what are the action plans that we're going to do. So is it important to stay on there to actually have an action plan to lay it out in front of you?
Oh, yeah. Every Wednesday morning when we're in our office meeting, we use an app that you can have on your phone, you can have on your desktop. And all week long, all of us are adding topics for the meeting and to-dos. And then when we go in the meeting, that topic, the app that we use, you can hit it and put who's accountable for it and when it's due by. And before we used to do that, we would talk week after week after week about the same thing, but it was never assigned to anybody. So nobody ever took accountability for it, and it never had a due date. So it never got done. Now it gets done every time.
Right. So, but also another process is to assign ownership of those tasks. And that's one of the processes when you look at Traction, the OS system, that somebody assumes the responsibility. And it's also vastly important that we put deadlines on stuff. If we make requests of our people, if we leave it open-ended, it probably is not going to get done. But if we put, how important are those deadlines and those type of things, Brandi?
I mean, super important. That's what I love about the app, because you just type in what the deadline is and then who's responsible for it. And so everybody knows, everybody can go and look at it at any point. And then we start the next meeting the next week with going over what everybody got accomplished on that and presenting their tasks that they were assigned.
Right. And you know, when you look at that and you said something there, and I want to bring it up, there's my phone. Okay. Look at all the apps that are on there, and there's pages. Brandi, what do you remember a time in life that we didn't have apps?
I mean, I did. It goes back into the change thing, right? Like, there are still people, my accountant he hates email, and he prefers everything is written on pen and paper, and he'll send stuff by he'll write stuff on pen and paper for us and then have his office email it over to us, like after they scan it in. He is resistant to the technology and the change. And I think that that's something very important that we all have to look at, because I think in today's world, things are changing extremely rapidly. You know, I look at, I don't think it's political, but I look at like our world today. I was thinking about this, and, you know, people now are putting their pronouns in with their signatures on their email. And people are like, you know, some people are like, oh, pronouns, yada, yada, we don't want to use that. And I was thinking of something to try to compare it to. And I thought, you know, that must be what it was like when, okay, now we're going to give women the right to vote, or we're going to we're going to desegregate the schools. And at the time, those were such radical ideas. And today it's just normal. And so I think a lot of the things that seem radical today, 10 or 15 years from now, are just going to be normal.
And that's very true. You know, it's just like I went to a grocery store. I was in Vermont this past week, and I picked up a few things at a grocery store, and I checked out, and I needed a bag, and they charged me 10 cents for a paper bag. Okay, 10 cents, and there was no paper bag. So if you don't bring your own bag, you're going to pay for a paper bag in the state of Vermont and other states now. So yes, these are all the changes we have to accept. So Sheryl, any last words from you on this? Any thoughts you've got on the factor of change and sustaining change?
I think everybody just needs to get ready for a lot more change. I wish I were not read as much as I do. I see the change coming down the pike. And is it going to be hard? It's going to really be hard for the older generation. The younger generation will accept it very early. But the thing is, if you're not in the generation to get it, you better learn how to ride with it. And you've got to sustain it. And in business, especially, you need to sustain, because that, if you tell, like Brandi said, if you tell somebody something and you let it go and you try it again, you're not only losing what you said in a position, but you're losing the respect of the people that are working for you.
Got you covered. So in other words, if you cannot sustain the change when you announce it to your people, then you are going to affect yourself, and you're going to lose the respect of those that you lead. Would that be an adequate description?
That's what I truly believe, because to me, respect is more important than them liking you.
Gotcha. So Brandi, what about you? And Chuck just added in here, I'm going to put this up. The only constant in today's world is change. And you're dead on the money, buddy. Today's constant is change. So Brandi, what final thoughts would you have on today?
I mean, I agree with Chuck. It's constant, and you better hop on the bus and get on it and be ready for it and keep up on it. I think that's the hardest part. I see so many people that don't keep up on the changes. Yesterday I was on a meeting through Service Titan. They have a group called Lady Titans, and we were all on the meeting, and somebody brought up annual performance reviews. Well, annual performance reviews are outdated. If you're still doing annual performance reviews and you're not doing real-time coaching, that's outdated, and you failed to keep up on the changes. So I think it's important that you do your research and make sure that you're keeping up with technology, all the changes in the world.
Right. And Brandi, you're a person that actually talks about things that you have implemented that you found out are not the right way to go today. And people actually copy you, they even take responsibility for forming the idea. But one is your point system, which you came up and said, hey, you don't want to use that. That's antiquated. That's out of date, which is one of the things we hear from Brandi a lot. You know, us being older, I hope we're not antiquated and out the boat yet here, but hey, we're still trying. So, but is that true?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's funny to me because I started using that when I very first came into the industry 10 years ago. And honestly, it was probably getting ready to go out of date then, but it's what I was used to. It's what I had been taught. So I was still using it. A lot of people picked up on it in the industry and started using it. Unfortunately, those people are still using that system, and that system has been outdated for quite some time now. So, and I even I had clients that I was working with that I had to tell, look, they had started using it. And I'm like, look, we're not using this anymore. This is what we need to be doing instead. And they're like, but you told us to use this. And I did, because at the time that was what we had. And at the time, that's what culture and employees wanted, but it's changed now. And so we have to change with it.
That's it. So we're going to end with the following. Change. It can be painful, and it's up to you to decide, do you want to undergo and sustain change even though it's painful, or do you want to remain in the pain that you're in? You know, when you look at it, if you don't have a library of SOPs, if you don't have a long range plan, if you don't have a strategic plan, if you don't understand what your company's needs, if you're not doing SWOT meetings, if you are not communicating regularly with your people, if you're not having meetings, all the things that are required for success. Sheryl, what would you add to my words that are required for success today in the world of business?
Communication, good leadership skills, just anything that can bring you and your company closer together.
Okay. Brandi, what about you? What would be the key things, the key words that people need to keep pushing for?
Teamwork makes the dream work. There's that cliche saying, but it's true. We can't do it on our own. I know I certainly can't. I have a whole team of people that support me every day, and I couldn't do it without them.
Right. And teamwork takes someone to lead that team. And so, do you need to increase your leadership skills? Do you need to increase your ability to speak to other people? Do you need someone to hold you accountable? If you do, hey, maybe one of us are the accountability partner you need. But if we're not, there's other people out there. Okay, we're not going to say we've got all the answers for everybody. We've all got pretty full workloads right now, just to be honest. But we'd love to have a conversation with you. So if you'd like to have a conversation with us, it's not going to cost you a dime. Reach out to one of us. Let us know. I want to talk. I want to know more about the systems that you can bring to us and how you can help us sustain the change that we know we need to go through. Okay, so reach out to us. We are the certified coaching team here at CVC Success Group, and you contact us at any time. And with that, we're going to end today's episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. We appreciate you joining us. We hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and we hope that 2023 takes you closer to those dreams that you have and turns into your business reality. So we'll see you next time on the next